Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. It's Football at 4.
And Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It's brought to you each and every day by our friends at Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Andrew DiCecco from InsideTheBirds.com is here. And don't forget, you can find the Inside the Birds podcast on all their podcasting platforms and on their YouTube channel. Just search Inside the Birds. Andrew was out in Los Angeles to see the Eagles take on the Rams, and now they'll be getting them ready for the Jets, and we'll talk a little bit more about what he saw out there and how they can move that forward. The matchups here with Andrew DiCecco here on the Sports Web. AD, what's up, buddy?
Mike, I'm doing well, my friend. How about yourself?
All is well. I know you were in L.A., a little Hollywood for you, and the Eagles weren't Hollywood. They were kind of punch you in your mouth, grind it out again. I mean, it was another day where the offense just kind of took the heart and soul of that Rams defense, it looked like.
Well, initially it looked like it was going to be a shootout, right? When you saw the Eagles really strike early, and then the Rams started getting things going with Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua taking advantage of the middle of the field, you started to think, oh, wow, this is going to be one of those games where the Eagles aren't going to be able to stop the bleeding defensively with Cooper Kupp sort of hitting his stride after coming back from injury. But the Eagles really held firm, and in the second half, they completely shut out the Rams, and I thought that it was a really, really strong showing from the defense and Sean Desai. Really, Mike, to be honest, it was the Eagles' most complete win of the season.
Yeah, you mentioned some of the things they did. Sean Desai's name, you just kind of popped in there. You mentioned it looked like it was going to be a shootout. Why wasn't it?
Well, I think the insertion of Bradley Roby in the second half, after the Eagles really were shuffling nickel corners in the first half with Mario Goodrich, Eli Ricks, and Bradley Roby. I think Roby started to settle in a little bit. Remember, he was just signed Wednesday and had to find his footing. He'd only played 25 snaps. But I also think a lot of it had to do with the Eagles' defensive line, the unrelenting nature of their pass rush, really bearing down on Jared Goff and leaning on that offensive line of the Rams. I think that they're just not equipped to stop that. And eventually the dam broke, and I thought that we saw a lot of inaccurate passes and erratic throws and hasty decision-making from Matthew Stafford that you weren't necessarily seeing in the first half, that I think ultimately it just was an amalgam of things that the Eagles were doing and just unrelenting in their approach, and I think that was the result. And they weren't able to do anything.
I want to get some thoughts on some things that you saw from guys that have been questioned in the weeks in the past here. Sue Opeta is in at right guard. He had Aaron Donald. How did Opeta grade out, and what did they do with him to help him?
Yeah, I thought Opeta did a fantastic job. And, you know, he's someone that I've mentioned. He's been around here in 5 years. This is his sixth NFL start. He's really strong. He has violent, heavy hands. He fires his hands from the ground because he was a former defensive tackle. And when I spoke to him, he said that's what Aaron Donald happens to do quite well. Also, that's one of the things that makes him really stand out. But he got a lot of help. 2 and 3 guys at some points were used to sort of keep Donald at bay, who's the best in the business, or Jalen Carter. You can make a case that Jalen Carter is trending in that direction in the coming years. But I think that Sue Opeta did a fantastic job and really rose to the occasion. He had help from Kelsey. He had help from Lane. I spoke to Kelsey after the game, and he said, yeah, he had some nerves, but, you know, nerves, me and Lane told him that nerves aren't necessarily a bad thing, and they make you feel alive, and they sometimes can fuel you and provide that adrenaline. And like I said, I really do think that Sue did a nice job.
All right. Obviously, the offensive line, very good. Opeta not making them miss a beat in there. Big day for Dallas Goedert. Was this circumstance? Did they try to get him the ball more? Was it something the Rams were doing? Why Goedert finally getting that breakout day?
I really do think that it's just one of those instances where this was his week. Next week could very well be a Devontae Smith week, who was really quiet last Sunday to my surprise. But the middle of the field was pretty open. Now, Ernest Jones, the linebacker for the Rams, and Christian Roseboom, they're adequate players, but the middle of the field was open, and quite frankly, it has been open for the past few weeks. The Eagles were just able to capitalize and get Goedert in a rhythm. Now, 49 of those yards were largely after the catch. You see the violence in which Goedert, sort of exhibits and imposes his will against defenders, and that's really what he can do. And I think the Eagles were sorely lacking a third presence from a passing game standpoint, whether it be Watkins, whether it be Zacchaeus. It really needed to be Goddard, and you saw what he's able to do. I thought that getting him going and also getting Jalen Hurts going on the ground really unlocked the full potential of the Eagles' offense.
Yeah, really good stuff on the Eagles' offensive side of the ball. Andrew DiCecco, InsideTheBirds.com. Let's take a look at defense. You mentioned Bradley Roby, so let's go there. What happened in the slot? How did it start? How did it play out? How did it end?
So during pregame warm-ups, by all indications, it looked like Mario Goodrich was running with the ones. They were lining up, and surely enough, he did get the start. Then I think it was 6 or 7 plays in, you saw Eli Ricks get some nickel reps, and Eli Ricks going into the game only had 1 snap on defense, and that was in the Vikings game. But as I spoke to Eli last week, as I will do each week for my rookie diary series for InsideTheBirds.com, he mentioned to me that for over the past two and a half weeks, he had been primarily learning the nickel position. About 50% of his reps had come in the slot, but I think that I think it was to my surprise and to the surprise of many to see him out there actually in a game situation against Cooper Kupp on the first series of the game. But you saw them use Goodrich primarily on running down formations. They like his ability to tackle and pursue the ball carriers. And then in obvious passing situation, you saw Eli Ricks. And then on the second series, you saw them implement Roby. And, I mean, Roby is a player who's played 10 years in this league. There's not a lot that he hasn't seen. It's just about getting his sea legs under him. He hasn't played any football since August. But I think you saw what he's able to do, or at least be able to hold it down and make it manageable in the second half of the game. I still do think you're going to see a patchwork approach in this area. You might see Sidney Brown assume some of those reps as well when he gets healthy, and he has been healthy throughout the week. All signs point to him being good to go for Sunday. So I think that you're going to see the Eagles piecemeal it a little bit. But I think you have to be encouraged with what you saw from Bradley Roby in that second half of the game.
Now, I know Slay did not practice yesterday, and obviously if he would be out, that would change some things. You'd probably see Josh Jobe again, right, get back on that outside. But the Eagles secondary still in flux, still fluid. The safety position, too. I mean, they just can't seem to get guys healthy. Evans had the next situation. Now he was out yesterday with a knee, and obviously that's secondary. But what about the linebacking core with Nick Morrow, Nakobe Dean potentially returning to the roster this week, and then Zach Cunningham? You know, Andrew, there was a time where Zach Cunningham wasn't here, and people thought it might be Dean and Morrow. Could we see that duo? Could we see Dean be the odd man out? Does Morrow get knocked out? Is it a rotation of the three? Give us a little survey says of what you see at linebacker.
Yeah, Mike, really interested to see what the Eagles do here at the linebacker position. I certainly don't think that it's going to be Nakobe who's the odd man out. Nakobe was a player who was held in high regard going into the season. You wore the green dot, and there's a lot of intrigue about what he can provide to the second level. Now, what the question becomes: what happens beside him? I think that it's going to be Zach Cunningham that gets the nod opposite Nakobe. I think that when you look at Nakobe, he gives you he's a really good in pass coverage and maybe not as great against the run, but he's really instinctive. Zach Cunningham is very good against the run and is a little susceptible to surrendering plays in pass coverage. He's been targeted quite a bit. But Morrow is more of a pass coverage linebacker, so I think putting him beside Nakobe gives you a little bit of a one-dimensional feel there, and teams can run on you a little bit. And the Eagles really like Zach Cunningham. I mean, he hasn't adorned the green dot or anything like that, but he's been really tough and physical against the run, and he provides a tough, hard-nosed presence at the second level. So adding Nakobe next to that, I think, gives the Eagles probably their best duo. And then you can mix Morrow in, and I think the odd man out would be Christian Ellis, who really hasn't been much of a factor on defense since week one, really.
Yeah, all right. Let's look at this matchup here because I don't know about you. I'll ask you your opinion on it. You can agree or disagree with me. But this Jets defense, outside of probably San Francisco, if you like the San Francisco defense better, fine. But this might be the best defense they'll see the rest of the year, this Jets team.
The 49ers.
Well, I said outside of the 49ers. If you like the 49ers better, fine. But other than them, they might be either the next best or the second best one that they'll see. Yeah,
that's a fair assessment. Look, this is going to be a really big test. Obviously, the Eagles defense should be able to take care of Zach Wilson and company, but you don't want to take them lightly. You're going to their place. It's a short trip, granted, but I think defensively the Jets provide a lot of different ways that they can really throw Jalen Hurts and company for a loop, and they provide some good pass rush. I think in coverage they can do some good things. Sauce Gardner versus A.J. Brown is an interesting storyline to keep an eye on. They can bear down on Jalen Hurts and force him out of the pocket. So, I mean, they're going to have to scheme for this, and they're not going to take the game lightly given the deficiencies that the Jets have offensively. But I think this will be a nice little test before they have the Miami Dolphins in Week 7.
Yeah, so let's take a look a little bit about the matchups here, because you got Sauce Gardner, Williams in the secondary, very good there if DJ Reed can't play. If you're the Eagles, what's the pass game look like this week? Good linebackers, too, by the way, from this Jets team.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, I think this could be a Devontae Smith week. I thought last week would be, but you mentioned DJ Reed and his availability. I think Devontae Smith, you have to get him going. He only had one catch, and it seems like whenever a player is shortchanged seemingly in the stat sheet, it's almost an overcorrection the next week, right? Yeah. We saw that with A.J. Brown, and I think that could be the case with Devontae. I still think you have to find a way to get the ball in Dallas Goedert's hand and let him do some damage after the catch and set that tone. He's very physical. He almost punches defenders in the face instead of that stiff arm. He's very heavy-handed in that way. But I also think you need to try and find a way to be balanced and run the football because, yeah, the Jets do have a pretty staunch run defense, but I think you have to find a way to get DeAndre Swift going because that just opens up the entire playbook.
Yeah, I like Smith this week, too. It's funny you say that because he was the guy in my head, too, that I think is going to be getting a big game. And I don't know who Sauce Gardner, who he'll get matched up with, but that'll be fun. Whether it's Smith or Brown, that will be a fun battle there to watch for sure. I said the other day, Andrew, the matchup that I like is up front. I think the Eagles can run the ball and kind of do what they did against Tampa, do what they did against Minnesota, where they just kind of wear them down and kind of take their hearts out and just run the ball at this team. I think you can get yards on the ground against this Jets bunch.
Yeah, and I like the Eagles' offensive line against anyone, no matter what the defensive line, no matter what defensive line they're up against, right? I mean, even Washington had a really strong defensive line, and I thought they did some good things up front. But you like the push that you're getting from Kelsey, from Landon Dickerson especially. Sua Opeta is really, really strong. He's a mauler in the running game, and I think Lane even mentioned that yesterday when he spoke to the media. So I like the Eagles matchup there, and I think you can get some good things going on inside there with DeAndre Swift and Kenny Gainwell. I think Kenny Gainwell could be your grinder and have an even bigger role maybe than he has in recent weeks.
All right, Andrew DiCecco, of course, InsideTheBirds.com. Look at the Eagles' defense here. They're up against Zach Wilson, and, he struggles a lot. He's made, I guess, a little bit of strides, but with the Jets' passing game, we know the Eagles have a lot of questions in that secondary. But does the Jets' passing game, Garrett Wilson's a really nice player, concern you at all this week?
Well, Garrett Wilson does, and he's a player that they can move around, and you saw how the Eagles struggled with Cooper Kupp early, with Puka Nacua, and when you have so many young pieces that are in the secondary, there's so many moving parts, communication breakdowns are imminent, and I think when you don't want to give a team like the Jets any room to maneuver, and if you give them some space, or they're going to be able to capitalize on communication blunders and gaffes, regardless of what you think of Zach Wilson. He's an NFL quarterback, and he's competent enough where he's going to be able to pounce and see what the Rams maybe did well. I actually, going back to the Rams game, I thought that there were I think Sean McVay outsmarted himself a little bit. There was an opportunity there to keep continuing to go back to the well of what was being so successful, which was Cooper Kupp in the slot. So I think the Jets might be able to look at that and say, hey, there's an area that we can exploit here. And even more so, depending on the circumstances surrounding Darius Slay. We'll have to see what the injury report calls for on Thursday.
Yeah, I know that Slay, as we mentioned, could be a casualty this weekend with the knee problem here, and they might want to keep it safe. Hey, they're up, in the standings here. Don't take any chances. Maybe get him healthy a week, kind of like they did with Fletcher Cox last week. We'll see how that goes as this week progresses here. Let's look at you take a look at the up front, the challenge up front. Quinnen Williams, not quite Aaron Donald, but they do have some talent up front. But again, not quite Aaron Donald. I think the Eagles should be able to get yards on the ground, but their offensive line should really be able to pave the path in the run game, you would think here.
Right, yeah, there is no Aaron Donald, but I think collectively the Jets have superior talent across the board. Aaron Donald's one of the best in the business, but Quinnen Williams and they have Jermaine Johnson and other players that are capable. So I think that you're not able to focus on one player and sell out to stop that one player from being that game wrecker. I think you have to account for everyone across the line. But the Eagles' offensive line is equipped to stop anybody or at least keep them at bay. And I really like their chances there in the trenches. And I think that all things should be on the table and available for the Eagles if they're able to execute and continue what they've been doing, except they're going to have to correct the red zone deficiencies there, right? 2 for 6 last week. That's the one thing that if you're looking at it at the 5-game sample size and what do they need to improve upon, I thought they did some really good things on third down, Mike, but red zone, they need to clean that up.
Yeah, what about when you take a look at Breece Hall and that run game? How's the Jets? I think the Jets, obviously, their offensive line is an area where they really struggle. I would think the Eagles could really give the Jets some problems up front.
Yeah, and they just lost Elijah Vera Tucker, who's a very good offensive lineman, and I think that this is a classic example of a game where the Eagles could force a team to become one-dimensional fairly early and pounce and shut down the running game, and then all of a sudden you're asking someone like Zach Wilson, who's not really equipped to put the passing game or put the offense on his shoulders and have to make plays by pushing the ball down the field, and then all of a sudden that presents the tidal wave of pass rushers and someone like a James Bradbury or Reed Blankenship or whoever to go get the football. And then you start to see the game starts to spin and spiral out of control.
Yeah, so obviously a lot on Zach Wilson's plate, it would seem, against the Eagles this week. Obviously, the Eagles have never lost to the Jets. It should be another game where Philadelphia can control any way they want, Andrew. If they control it any way they want, what's the best way for you?
I think you try to wear them down early and run the football. And then you pass when you have to. But, I mean, this is a game that I don't view to be considered particularly close. But I think you want to protect your quarterback from getting any hits from an early at least, and try to establish the running game, and then really take to the air, because I think that all things, as I was saying, should be available against this team. Certainly not a team you want to take lightly, but I think that when the Eagles are at their best, there's not much the teams can do to stop them. So I don't view this game being particularly close.
All right. Yes, interesting stuff from Andrew. So that's kind of been the theme this week. Line's like 7 right now. It has been 7-41. It sounds like teams think the Jets might not score. Vegas doesn't think the Jets will score a whole heck of a lot, and the Eagles should win by over a touchdown. Remember, the game is in Jersey. It's not in Philadelphia, so you got to travel up there to play this Jets team who hasn't been, you lose Rodgers. Wilson's been pretty average at best, and they've been hanging in there. So we'll see if the Jets can pose a challenge. He's Andrew DiCecco. This is Football at 4. And, of course, he, like all guests here on the Sports Bash, is brought to you by Bet365 for Football at 4. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Andrew, thanks so much, man.
You got it, Mike. Talk soon.